So, right, wrapping up this section on the absurd, right? How are we going to take this and move forward with it, right? I think a lot of what we're going to be looking for with the theater of the absurd is, again, um, an analysis of what characters are doing and how they are feeling and what's going on and motivating them. It is important to remember, we are going to find out, right, in the next week or so, that for the most part, right, this idea of the theater of the absurd, that is a title that was given to a lot of these theater pieces, right? They were not sitting down and saying, we're going to create some theater pieces that are absurdist. It was simply the reaction of people who observed these plays to say, eventually, right, these are absurd, right? And are sort of showing the futility of, the task at hand, etc., right? But also, right, absurd in the sense of this is not what we expected. This is not where we thought things were going to go. This is not communication that we expect or that we understand. So as we move forward, right, what are we going to do with it? Well, the blend of existentialism, absurdism, gives us a full base upon which to really build the sort of the rest of the philosophy we're going to see throughout the semester, right, in the plays that we're going to be looking at, right? So where does all of this come from? Why were people so negative and focused on responsibility, etc., etc., etc.? Well, philosophy is developed for a lot of different reasons, right? And there is no one reason why necessarily absurdism just pops up and the theater of the absurd and that style of theater sort of just exists. There's no one reason for it, but there are a lot of cultural things that we can point to that I think will help us to understand where we're starting from, right? And the first of those starts back right in the teens, 19 teens, when we talk about Dada, Surrealism, and right ready-made art, which is our other focus for this week, right? We talk about surrealism, we talk about Dada, we talk about ready-mades, we talk about right art that is a reaction to and a continuation of trends that continue to sort of develop. So, to start, let's go all the way back to Monet. Another great French painter, right? What does he do? Well, Monet is looking at the art that is currently in France, that is currently exhibited in museums, which is, in general, very well painted. People are proportional. There are clear images. There's a clear idea of what's going on. And Monet is perfectly capable of doing this, right? There are pieces that you can look at by Monet that are very realistic, right? It's realism and it's classical and it's, evidence that the guy knows how to paint a person, right? He knows what he's doing, right? But at a certain point, the reaction that he has is that this art is gatekeeping, right? It's gatekept. If you can't paint a certain way, you don't get to be in a museum. And also, if you want to paint, you have to be in these studios because these giant studios are the only places you can set people up where the light will be the same in general, right? Where the people can sort of sit and pose and, right, you can create your artwork and, have other people help you with your artwork and all this other stuff, right? Monet says, you know what? I'd really like to be able to take my piece and go outside and paint outside. And I'd like to be able to capture the immediacy of what I'm seeing, right? As a sun is rising, if you don't capture it right away, by the time you set up, an entire studio, well, there it goes, right? The sun is risen and you don't get the same, right, view. And so his idea is, right, instead of this, art that's taking a long time to complete, let's try and capture the immediacy of the moment. What does it look like now? What will it look like in 20 minutes, right? If I could do 3 canvases in 3 hours because I'm just, right, painting as quickly as I can and capturing everything I can, right? That could be really something, right? Now, people didn't like it. But art has always been a reaction, either for or against, the art that's come, before it, right? You're either trying to improve it, you're trying to build on it, you're trying to say, I want to react to it and tell you what I think about it, in the artwork that I'm doing. So Dada comes up, right, in the middle of and the end of, right, the First World War. And it is a reaction, right, to not only the art that's being produced, right, which has become, a little bit more abstract, right? Cubism has already started to happen, right? You've now gone from, right, we are painting images that are perfect copies, as perfect as they can be, to getting impressions as quickly as possible, to I'm drawing people as squares in different shapes, like Picasso, to I am painting something that represents the motion of a person, not even the person itself, right? Just their motion, which Marcel Duchamp does with a nude descending a staircase. He's got a couple of those, right? And Dada gets to a point where it says, does art even mean anything anymore? Now, is it directly a reaction to the art that has come before it? Well, in a way, right? All art is, like we said, right? But it's also a reaction to, what does an artist do anymore? Does an artist have a voice? Does an artist have a role? Does art mean anything, right? And Duchamp and others, right, within the Dadaist camp say, we don't know, right? We don't know what life is giving us anymore, right? We have, entered into a war where people are sent off to the front lines to do nothing, and many of them die in trenches without ever actually seeing a battle. So what's the point of all of this, right? War seems to be a stupid thing, and, if they're not going to make any sense, we're not going to make any sense either. So, right, Duchamp finds a urinal, somebody signs it, he puts it into a museum and says, this is art. People aren't happy, right? Sophie Arp gets a mannequin bust and starts tacking things to its head and just calls it a head. And people say, well, that's not art, you just found some things and put them together. And she says, yep, that's what I'm doing, right? So you have some ready-mades, which are objects that are just simply exhibited as art. Sometimes they're sort of stuck together, but people will look at them and say, well, is this really art? Like, did you do anything? And an artist will say, what does an artist do? Like, does the fact that an artist decides to do something differently make it not art, right? It starts a conversation about what art is and what art is not, but it comes from this idea that there is a disillusionment with what society is, what artists' roles are in society, right? Should an artist even be creating things in a society where nobody really cares about what art is because we're busy dying on battlefields, right? And so, sort of one of the things we're going to do is we're going to talk about what I want you to do with Dada and what I want you to do with the art that I'm going to sort of direct you to. But also what we're doing with this film and the surrealism that comes out of that, right? And how all of this sort of builds together and hands us, right, existentialism, absurdism, and, tying the despair and everything together. So I think that the next video will probably be our last one for this week. Cannot guarantee it, but I believe it's going to be the last one.